Hello, Snugglebugs. Welcome to today's Hearthstone video. We're coming at you with some card review for the new Titans expansion that's coming out in August. I'm a little late on some of these, so I'm probably going to feel like I'm rapid firing through them because I'm going to be doing a whole classes at a time, starting today with the Death Knight. Subscribe if you'd like to see my thoughts on the rest of the expansion. I'll be trying to bring them to you when I can. Now, starting up here with our first card, the Chained Giant. This is a 8/5/11 cost Rush Reborn minion. That costs one less for each plague shuffled into the enemy deck. So we'll get into what plagues are in a bit, which I actually love. I'm really hoping that they're good. I'm hoping to play them. I like those kind of weird, almost RNG style decks in the sense that kind of control, fill stuff with your opponent's deck, and they have them draw, and random shenanigans can happen. So I think this could be really good. I'm really kind of surprised now. I guess it's not called a giant, but I'm not surprised it's not like an 8/8, and they could have called it like a chain giant instead. Maybe it doesn't really fit. I could be wrong. But 8/5 with Rush and Reborn is really powerful because you can obviously rush into something, trade, it reborns itself, regains the rush, and can rush into something else. So here we have the Distressed, and apologies, but I'm going to call it the Valdir. Valdir. This is a 2-mana 3/2, so decent stat line. Of course, most people prefer 2/3 just because. But it has Death Rattle, shuffle 2 random plagues into your opponent's deck. Now, I'm trying to see if we can. Apologies. So what that means is you'll shuffle 2. Undead Peasant shouldn't, I don't think, be in this right now. Oh wait, that's because of one of the plagues. So you shuffle either a Blood Plague. It's 2 random, so it could be 2 of them, which is cast one draw, take 2 damage, restore 2 health to the enemy hero. Now it sounds weird, but because it goes into your opponent's deck, it actually means that your opponent would take 2 damage and you heal 2, which is really good. Unholy Plague. Take 2 damage. So again, they would take 2 damage when they draw this. Summon a 2/2 undead for your opponent, which again would be for you, which is this undead peasant. And then the Frost Plague, they take 2 damage, but then the next card they cost 1 more. The next card that your next card that you play. Sorry. So anything that goes forward here that involves these plagues means that's any of those 3 that go into the deck. Again, I think decent stat line. I'm excited for the plagues myself, so I think overall, like this, honestly, I'm surprised it wasn't just like a 2/2 because of its effect. I know it's over time, but effectively does 4 damage to your opponent over time, and then it has positive effects for you, which is really awesome. Speaking of the plagues, we also now have Down with the Ship, which is a 2-mana, deal 3 damage to a minion. If it dies, shuffle 2 random plagues into your opponent's deck. Also note that these runes so far have been either Unholy or Unholy and Frost, and I'm actually hoping that we can potentially use sort of a plague-based rainbow deck with our climactic explosion. That's kind of my hope for the deck playstyle for this. Sorry. Now, Down with the Ship, 2-mana, deal 3 damage. Amazing, right? Like, that's a pretty standard, I would say, spell. And then, of course, giving them potentially another 4 damage to face and 2 bonus effects for you over time is a win. Urologizer, so again, I pronounce maybe that incorrectly. Battlecry, spend 3 corpses to deal 3 damage, which of course, 3-mana, 3/3. Battlecry, deal 3 damage. You know, you're going to have corpses, it's going to happen. Now, this is the first card we're going to be reviewing, at least in the Death Knight, that has the Forge mechanic. So as a quick overview for those who may not know, Forge is coming into the new Titans expansion, and it acts like tradable in the sense where you have to hover it over your deck, but it costs 2 mana, and it's effectively spending 2 mana to upgrade your card. So on turn 2, you could actually forge this to make it a 3-mana, 3/3, and instead of spending 3 corpses and dealing 3 damage, you would gain 3 corpses and deal 3 damage. Now, of course, that in total means that cost of this card becomes 5, which means it's maybe not quite as good. But again, I think Forge is going to be a mechanic that's really used if you have mana floating, or in this case, like I said, you don't really have a good turn 2 play, so you just put it on 2, and all of a sudden you get a good 3-mana play that starts building up your corpses for your other cards. Next up, we have Frozen Over, which is another 2-mana spell. Both players draw 2 cards, and your opponent cannot play them on their next turn. I mean, it's a decent draw card. You still give your opponent 2 cards, which, I mean, could be negative if they're playing a control deck and have a full hand. The thing is, they just can't play them on their next turn, which, I mean, sounds like it'll help solve the issue of, like, oh, we're giving them 2 cards, but they can't play it. But to be fair, you're giving them 2 cards they didn't already have, so they might not have even realized and planned ahead to play those. So I don't really think, I mean, it's neat, and it makes it so it's not as terrible as a drawback, but I don't think it's really going to affect your opponent too much, unless, of course, the very first card they draw, which would have been their normal draw the next turn, becomes like was a super important board clear they were going to play. But other than that, I mean, it's neat. It's 2 mana to effectively draw 2. Again, I think it'd be better used in an aggro deck anyway, like Frost. So maybe it's just going to give them some more aggro. You don't really care about your opponent's drawing cards. And 2 mana draw 2 in that case is fantastic. Then we have our first legendary for the Death Knight. We have Hell Yeah, or Hell Yeah, depending, because I like the Plague, so Hell Yeah. Which is just a 4 mana 4/4, pretty standard stat line, especially when cards have a really good effect. Battlecry, shuffle all 3 of the different plagues into your opponent's deck. Plagues they draw this game are unending. Now, personally, I'll admit, I don't know exactly what they mean by that, but my guess, and I'm pretty sure, and if I'm right, I think it's awesome, effectively what happens is when they draw the plague, or any plagues now for the rest of the game, they will go back into the deck and reshuffle, right? So instead of only maybe putting, you say you put 2 in their deck, in this case you put 5, right? You're putting something else plus this. They have 5 curses in their deck. They're going to keep cycling through those eventually, right? And it's going to just keep filling up their deck, and the more plagues you put in. So the faster you get at Hell Yeah before they draw plagues, the better, because that means that they're going to be constant and cycling. And I would guess they can never go back on the top of your deck, but again, because you have, say, potentially 5 or 7 or 9 of these at this point, depending on the state of the game, you could get them in a cycle, because it's going to shuffle, put a new one maybe on top, and put a new one on top, and things like that. Obviously, that's like best case scenario. I think it just makes it so these 2 damage cards that seem mediocre make them feel a lot better, because they go back in the deck and you can have them multiple times. But I personally am so excited for this deck. This is going to be my top pick if I don't open this in packs, which I hope I do, to craft like day one. Obviously not saying you have to, but let me know in the comments down below if this is the type of deck you want to see, because I wanted to be trying to come at you with some Titans decks day one, and I think this is where I'm going to start. So next up we have Northern Navigation, which is another 2 mana spell. Discover a spell from your deck. If it's a frost spell, freeze a random enemy minion. So this is an interesting take, because it gives you a frost spell. More than likely you're going to play this in a frost deck, which is really good, especially for, aggro frost demon hunter. However, in reality, effectively spend 2 mana, freeze an enemy minion, is kind of slow in that sense. Now, on the other hand, it gives you another frost spell for all your other triggers and things like that, and you basically cycle through, and maybe it does help slow your opponent down so you can hit face with your whole board and freeze the one big minion. So I think it's going to depend on what the meta looks like. If you're an aggressive deck against an aggressive deck, this may be too slow. If you're an aggressive deck trying to stop your opponent from playing 1 or 2 big things that's going to like somehow counter your board, this may freeze it to give you that extra turn. So overall, I think this is decent, but I don't know. For some reason, I'm a little held back on it. So could be wrong. Could be wrong. I've definitely been wrong before. And then now we have the Staff of the Primus, a new Death Knight unholy weapon, 2 rune Death Knights. After your hero attacks, shuffle a random plague into your opponent's deck. So yet another. This is a plague weapon, effectively a 1 mana, put 3 plagues into your opponent's deck. So good. So far we have ways to put, I think, 2 would be 2 for the minions, so 4 in total. 2 from the spell, so that's like 6 in total. 6 from here is 12. Hell Yeah is 3, so 15 potential plagues in the deck. And of course, if Hell Yeah gets out early, they constantly cycle through. Deck looks amazing. And then we have the Primus, the Titan, I should say, our first Titan. So this might take me a second, so I do apologize, and I may have to scroll down so you can see the related cards that come with this. But to go over it, for those who aren't aware, Titans are kind of the new it's a keyword, but sort of the new boss of each class, if you will, where they get played and they're so big. It's not like Colossus where they're going to get limbs, but they're so big they actually can't attack right off the hop. And they don't have Battle Cry, but they each, I believe, have 3 abilities. They each have 3 abilities, and one of which happens the turn you play it. So it's not do nothing right off the hop. And then every turn you effectively use an ability, and then when all the abilities are done, then they can attack. So, for instance, this Titan says, after this uses an ability, you discover a card with that rune. So if I use this card here called Runes of Blood, and sorry, I should shift that up a little bit of shifting. Runes of Blood, destroy an enemy minion. This minion and your hero gain its health. So say if the opponent has an 8/8 and you play this down, it removes the minion. I believe that means this becomes a 7, would be, in my example, 7/17, and your hero would also gain the 8 health as well. And since it says gain health and not heal, I feel like it's like the vampiric blood. Now, The thing with this is it also says after this uses an ability to discover covered that rune. So this would be a blood rune. So then you get also a discover another blood rune card. At the start of your next turn, you would get to pick between your runes of the unholy and runes of the frost here. And then runes of the unholy summon 2 of these bad boys. And then also discover an unholy card. And then rune of frost, the next spell you cast costs 3 less and has spell damage +3. So that's could be huge. And again, you see how this has all 3. It itself has no requirements, which I kind of wish had rainbow requirements, but of course then they would be locking their own Titan down. And the whole point is with the Titans, I think, is almost want to play them in almost every deck. But this looks amazing. I love Titans. I love the idea. And before we go to the last card, hit the subscribe button if you're enjoying this. I'm going to try to come out with reviews of all the classes, like I said. But last card, but not least, probably should have ended with the Primus. Apologies, is the Tomb Trader. It is a Frost Unholy. Battlecry, you can destroy a plague in your opponent's deck to deal 3 damage to all enemy minions. So kind of like the soul curses, curse soul, I forget what they're called now, that used to be in Warlock and Demon Hunter. You effectively, if you have a plague in your opponent's deck and you want a board clear, you can just play the Tomb Trader. It does get rid of one of the plagues, which sounds unfortunate, especially if they're cycling through. But again, if you're playing, say, like Frost Demon Hunter and they're aggro and they have like 4 minions on board, sacrificing that, say, 2 damage to potentially eliminate 4 cheap, low-cost minions. And then if you are playing a more control-heavy deck and you don't think that it's worth playing, it's only minions, not base damage, you of course just don't have to play it, right? You just don't have to play it. 4 mana, 4/3 is not really the worst stat line either. Again, always would prefer a 3/4 myself, but it is what it is. And that is it for the Death Knight. I appreciate you for watching. Thank you very much. Subscribe again. Sorry if I said that too many times. Getting a little rusty behind the camera, but I'll see you in the next one.